In a day and in a time when porno pervert preachers are coming out of the woodwork a lot, and all the attention, all the conversation seems to revolve around the porno pervert preacher, the sex offender, child molester preacher, and the flagrant homosexual, gay, sexual assault preacher. On the other end of the spectrum, why don't we also try to look at what the good thing is, okay, instead of just the shock and the awe? And so what I'm going to do is look at three biblical things that Jesus Christ said about good preachers. All right. Try to simplify this. I just wrote an article on it called Three Signs of a Good Preacher According to Jesus. So here we go. I'm going to use the NKJV. Okay. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you, let him become your servant. Jesus Christ in Matthew 20:25 and 26. So to me, this means that good preachers do not exhibit a control spirit, a despotic attitude, or any sort of a dictator type personality. Their sermons might be John the Baptist-y in the sense that they can urge and they can warn about the wrath and judgment of God against the egregious sins of the world. But then there's always going to be sort of this takedown towards the grace of God and that is received through faith in the blood of Christ. When it comes to their personal relationships outside the pulpit, that preacher's not going to act like a dictator, guilting people in a whole lot of to-do lists and tasks. Remember how the Pharisees would lay heavy burdens upon people and not lift a finger? Matthew 23:4. So in the pulpit, a good preacher might rail against the dictators of the world, like John the Baptist and Jesus preaching against the Pharisees, which essentially were religious dictators. They might rail against the dictators of the world, but in their personal lives, the good preacher will resist any such impulse to become a dictator himself. Instead, he'll be zealous for good works, knowing that the eyes of the Lord are always upon him, and so that he can help the down and outers whenever he can. He's motivated by a holy love that he receives, that he feels from the baptism in the Holy Spirit during worship, and he carries around with him. 2. Jesus said, all their works they do to be seen by men. Matthew 23:5. So a bad preacher can be made plain by the physicality of their religious expressions. They have fine church clothes. They have fine church buildings, fine cars, fine physical things that you can come and look at. And they say that all these things are for God. They say that prosperity and the outward exhibitionism of their luxury is a way of showing that they're blessed by God. Prosperity preachers are renowned for this. They say all these things are for God, but they're really just meant to impress other people at church. They really are just dressing to impress these men who only look on the outward appearance, even though God himself only looks at what's going on inside of people's hearts. 1 Samuel 16:7. So a good preacher, say John the Baptist, may pay little attention to his outward appearance, if not be totally unkempt at times, because his mind, for the most part, is set on inward spiritual matters. And that's the heart of every true missionary. He doesn't care about braving the jungles and having scabs and cuts and bruises and dirt and filth all over him. As long as his heart is spiritually minded and he's constantly making some sort of a mental connection with the Spirit of God. 3. Jesus said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Jesus said that in Matthew 23:13. So good preachers won't be like that. Instead, they'll be spiritually minded in their sermons and in their conversations. Good preachers will always give pointers on how to draw closer and closer to the Spirit of God through faith in the Bible, through the gospel, through a devout and holy prayer life. Good preachers will always promote the idea of holy living and increasing the amount of spiritual experiences that you can have of the Spirit of God. That's a good preacher. But a bad preacher is going to be anti-spiritual, is going to draw your attention away to natural things like cessationism. For example, that's a bad preacher who teaches people not to believe God intervenes with miracles today. That is a bad preacher. You know, some of these guys could be really sharp about other stuff, about sound doctrine versus false doctrine, but that's a bad preacher who teaches people to shun the experiences of the Spirit of God. A good preacher will point you towards the Spirit of God, will point you towards the kingdom of heaven. And so that's all I have to say about that.